In this video, we're going to continue our series on navigating actions after losing a job. Specifically, I'm going to highlight options available for you for some common types of employee benefits that you may have been presented with your previous employer. Specifically, life insurance, disability insurance, health savings accounts, flexible spending accounts, and equity compensation. So we're going to talk about each of these individually, beginning with life insurance. Now, when it comes to life insurance that you were offered through your previous employer, you generally have three options for it once you're unemployed. You can continue your existing policy, you can look to purchase a new policy, or you can wait for new employment with the hope of a new policy. When it comes to continuing your existing policy, this may be pretty low maintenance for you because you don't have to sign up with a new carrier or contract, and you may not have to go through that medical underwriting. The problem with this, though, is that the premiums tend to jump once you separate from service. The reason is, while you were employed with your previous employer, they often subsidize all of or a portion of your premium costs. You might have gotten life insurance through your previous employer with no out-of-pocket cost to you. And once you separate from service, you might see very expensive or high premiums. So this is something to be cognizant of in relation to your budget and whether you can afford the higher premiums. You can also look to purchase a new policy with a different carrier, again, outside of your previous employer. And for this, you'll want to kind of compare the premium cost to the fact of continuing your existing policy. And then also look at your death benefit coverage too, what makes sense in terms of death benefit coverage for your family. And then the final option would be to wait until you gain new employment and hopefully a life insurance policy through your new employer. But this has its own risks of needing to wait and then having that gap or time in period where you're uninsured. And the point of life insurance is to protect your family financially if something were to happen to you. So there is that risk of waiting because you don't know when you're going to find new employment. But the strategy behind this is life insurance through an employer tends to come at a lower cost through outside because the employer subsidizes the premiums. So that's a little bit about life insurance. Now, when it comes to disability insurance, your options are generally to purchase an individual disability policy or maybe apply through the state depending on your specific state. So you could look to purchase an individual disability insurance for that time period that you don't have disability since you left your previous employer. Or you could look to apply through the state. So some states, such as California, for example, offer disability insurance for those that are unemployed. So you have to check your specific state's unemployment program and if they offer disability insurance. So something to look into further there. Now, when it comes to your health savings accounts, you generally have four options for this, and it mimics the options for like a standard 401k or retirement plan. The options are use it up. So you could use up your health savings account, and of course, you need to use it for qualified medical expenses in order to avoid any penalties or taxation. You could also leave it where it is, right? So leave the HSA with that current administrator who it was through your previous employer, not really do anything to it. You could roll it into a new HSA plan through a new employer, or you could roll it into like a retail HSA through Fidelity, for example. They offer HSAs. So these options tend to be very similar to options for like an old 401k plan. When it comes to using it up, right, if you use up all of your HSA, then you're not going to have it available for your future retirement. So something to consider there. Leaving it where it is, you'll be subject to the existing investment options of that previous HSA. Rolling it into a new plan, again, we're not sure when you're going to be employed, and the options available for investments within the HSA new plan. Rolling it into a retail HSA would give you some more flexibility in terms of investment options for your HSA. Now, when it comes to flexible spending accounts, this option is pretty simple, and it's just spend it within that grace period or time period you have. So FSAs or flexible spending accounts generally are not portable, right? So you don't carry them to future employers. So when it comes to your flexible spending account, after you lose your job, the recommendation usually is to spend it within that allotted time on qualified medical expenses or qualified dependent care expenses, depending on the type of FSA that you have. Again, they're not portable. They're not like an HSA where you can move it to a new employer or roll it into a retail account. So you want to use the FSA for those qualified medical expenses while you still have a remaining balance. And then the final leg of this would be equity compensation. So there's many variations of equity compensations, but for purposes of this video, we'll just focus on the big three: employee stock purchase plans, stock options, and then restricted stock units. Now, when it comes to your employee stock purchase plan, so you're contributing to the employee stock purchase plan while you're employed. You defer a percentage of your paycheck, and then those funds that you contribute to are pooled to buy shares of the company stock. So once you lose employment, you're no longer buying shares of that previous company. So you're no longer contributing, right? Because you're not receiving a paycheck and you're not going to be buying any additional employer stock. But you do get to keep your purchased shares, right? So they're portable. So the shares that you purchased of your previous company, those are vested to you. Those are in your possession, and you're free to do what you like with that. You can keep them with the existing institution. You can move them to another institution. You can sell them. The options are up to you. Now, speaking of options, when it comes to stock options, we're talking about like non-qualified and qualified stock options. You generally have a window to exercise any options that you haven't exercised left. I'll say, though, that this is going to depend on the nature of how you separated from service from your previous employer. For example, if you got laid off, then you may have, for example, maybe 90 days to exercise any options that you haven't exercised already. But if you were terminated for cause, then you may not have any window at all. So this is going to depend on the reasoning of why you left your former employer. But the recommendation here is to look at your specific stock option agreement, look at the grant agreement, and see exactly how long you have to exercise any options that you haven't exercised already. But most of the time, you're going to have a window, and 90 days seems to be pretty common among employers. So that's a little bit about stock options. And then the final would be restricted stock units. So when it comes to restricted stock units, once you are no longer employed with the previous employer, you tend to lose those RSUs that haven't been vested yet, right? So you're going to forfeit those, but you do get to keep the shares that have already vested that you've already paid tax on. And then similar to the employee stock purchase plan, you're free to do what you like with that. So with those shares you've already paid taxes on, they're in your possession, they've vested, you can keep them with the original institution, or you can move them to a different institution, you can sell them, it's totally up to you. But you can expect that you're going to lose the RSUs that haven't vested yet, and you'll keep the ones that vested. So hopefully this was a helpful overview of these types of employee benefits. I did write an article about this that provides more detail, so click the top right of this video to check that out. And thank you very much, and we'll talk with you soon.